Ladies and gentlemen, today marks the day that we are going back to the 80s when a Victorian era was introduced by our late Queen Victoria. However, there is almost non-likely related evidence that show proof this era related to our Queen Victoria. Or maybe it is a coincidence. Moving on to the women's fashion in Victorian era. No woman should be wearing dress above their ankle. That is a big no-no. Plus, they wore layers of clothes, and the layers represent their social class. The more layer that they wear, the more high class they are. So, as example that I'm wearing today, there's a puff sleeve that I'm wearing that represents the Victorian era because women in that era wore more sleeve puffs and long sleeve blouse. And then they wear belts to secure the skirt from dropping. And skirts.
Do you know that Victorian women did not have makeup at all? Yes, and they used kitchen ingredients to be functioned as makeup, such as starch to wear as a foundation. And they used extract from vegetables to represent the lipstick, and so on. Now, let's move on.
Oh, hello. Don't forget to continue watch this video until the end because we are going deeper about Victorian era. And who is Emily Bronte? Well, we are going to know her deeper through their social class, women consciousness, trivia, interpretation, and evaluation.
The Victorian era was the time exactly comes after the Romantic Age, where it started with the reign of the Queen Victoria herself. This age is also known as the Compromise. The Compromise, but also the modern period of progress and unrest. The traits and characteristics of Victorian era was evident in many aspects, and to start with morality, the people in this age were losing the free meaning of literature. And that is why, during this time, novel as well as prose was the popular forms.
Have you read Oliver Twist by Mr. Dickens?
They read the fun and sentiment of Dickens, the social miniatures of Thackeray, or the psychological studies of George Eliot. They find in almost every case a definite purpose to sweep away error and to reveal the underlying truth of human life. Immorality of morality started during this time. During this time, the human revolution theory was proved by Darwin. So now, God was not the one who created fear among the people. So there was a kind of conflict between religion and science that occurred during this period. The Victorians came up with the idea that all children should go to school. They were the very first people to ask whether it was right to allow children to work. Educational opportunities were started to be given for women, in which the first women college was established in 1848 in London. In this era, women could take degrees at 12 different university colleges. It was a long period of peace, prosperity, refined culture, great advancements in technology, and national self-confidence for the Britain. The Industrial Revolution rapidly gained pace during Victoria's reign because of the power of steam. Victorian engineers developed bigger, faster, and more powerful machines that could run whole factories. Another Victorian era characteristic was the industrialization of Britain. Also, a number of factories sprawled up, leading to vast improvements in the living as well as working standards of the people. This also resulted in the emergence of various towns. Railways were constructed which replaced the traditional horse-drawn carriages as a mode of transport. Apart from this, a lot of scientific inventions took place, like the telephone, the radio, railways, sewing machines, etc. was invented. This time of intellectual development on the origin of species of Darwin shook to its foundations scientific thought. The first photographs were taken in the 1830s. The very first electric train was invented by a German in 1879. Improved communication and transport was a distinctive feature. An important characteristic of this period was also the advancement in the different modes of communication as well. Goods were easily transported by steamships and railways, which resulted in facilitating trade. Steamships further also contributed to making international travel popular. Additionally, even cinema, telephone, telegraphs, cars, and aircraft gave a boost to Britain's economy. Culture as well as architecture flourished during this period. The Gothic Revival architecture was noteworthy, resulting in the clash between Gothic and classical ideals. Additionally, in 1851, the Great Exhibition, which displayed the best innovations of the 19th century, was also organized, which was the first of its kind. Photography also emerged during this period, where the first photograph being that of her Queen Victoria herself. Postmortem photography was another key feature of the Victorian age. Music also became immensely popular during this period. Brass bands and the bandstand became well known. Music recording during this time was an unusual concept. The usual picture was the sound of the brass band being played while people walked leisurely through parklands. On the dark side of Victorian era, poverty was increased substantially since population increased, which made a large number of skilled and unskilled people keeping their wages to a bare minimum. Also, housing became difficult, thereby resulting in overcrowding and development of slums. In addition, this era was also famous for the rising rate of child labor in mines and factories. From the tender age of 3, children were made to work for 16 hours a day. Lastly, the Great Britain was also struck by the great social evil, which was none other than the prostitution. Due to the economic hardships suffered, women started getting into this business. In London, particularly, it was reported that the age of the girls who entered this business was ranged from the age of 15 to 22. Thus, this period can be very described as the most dynamic period in the history of the Great Britain, since on one hand, this period re-aped the golden fruits of science and technology, but on the other hand, this period also marked the birth of various social evils.
Oh, hi there everyone. You have came to the right time. We was about to talk about the famous figure in Victorian era. It's gonna be interesting. Trust me. Emily Bronte. Yes, Emily's full name is Emily Jane Bronte, who was born on July 30th in 1818 during the Victorian era. She was born in Taunton, Yorkshire, England. Emily was perhaps the greatest of the 3 Bronte sisters, but the record of her life is extremely meager, silent, and reserved. Emily was often seen as a strange woman who never was able to leave this isolation. Yet, her family continued to be cursed with sickness, so Emily's father made the decision to keep his daughter at home instead of sending them to the school after the loss. Emily and her 2 sisters became writers since most of their free time was now spent at home, reading and brainstorming and exchanging stories between siblings. Emily wrote almost 200 poems in her life, and her only novel, Wuthering Heights, is one of her famous works. The social classes and status in Victorian era. During the Victorian life and society, it reflects the fundamental and crucial part of human life. This is the conflict between civilized and uncivilized life, between the rich and the poor, between light and darkness, within the wild vitality and modern sterility. The Victorian society was divided into nobility of upper class, middle class, and the working class. The Victorian upper class consists of the aristocrats, nobles, dukes, other wealthy families working in the Victorian courts. The upper class was in a powerful position, giving them authority, better living condition, and other facilities. Meanwhile, the middle class had a very successful time in Victorian era. They were merely very wealthy business owners that maybe did not associate with royalty parties or occasions. But the poor or lower class of Victorian era had a very rough life. The Industrial Revolution had taken many could consider to be medium class and left them without job. One of the major problems was the immigration of the country. As for the working class was the worst affected class in Victorian times. This working class was further categorized as the skilled workers and the unskilled workers. Unskilled workers were placed below the skilled one, remained unemployed, and were vulnerable to the exploitation. For example, working class will be affected by the death of their father meant that there is no income to the family. The Industrial Revolution in the mid-century of the era brought drastic changes in the standard of living of the Victorian middle class people. This revolution opened the doors for more job opportunities, a decent living lifestyle, and a positive impact on the education of the children. Industrial Revolution attribute to the change in the status of women, which is called women consciousness. Revolution gave women an opportunity. Working women not only shared the burden of earning money, but also gave them a sense of security. Their life were no longer restricted to the house and the children after the revolution.
Women in their era were very timid and very reserved compared to women in the current time. Women in their era seldom to be opened compared to women of today. Women at the Victorian era's mentality were shaped by the societal views of a man are the only breadwinner of their families. Women at that time thought that men were the only sole purpose of bringing foods in their table, and that norm of thinking unfortunately bring very misfortune to those that lost their husband or their fathers. So they have no choice but to rely on their relative or relied on, how should I say this, unorthodox method of earning monies that was not approved by the church. But fortunately for them, the Industrial Revolution bring forth change where women can work and children can work, so they can control their own fate and economy. But although the revolution bring forth some new change into the woman's role in society, it doesn't change the fact that women who has property, who has riches, when they marry a man, the property are legally belonging to the spouse, and the woman gets nothing. Apart from things that have been mentioned before, women were also expected to sexually please their husband as sort of duty. In that era, the husband has a perception that their women, specifically their bodies, were their property. If a woman were not happy with the spouse, they have to resort to adultery, which was frowned upon at that time. While if a man does it the same, he will not look much bad, as it was completely normal and fine to have multiple lovers during that era. Adding on the fact that a divorced woman would be frowned upon by society, and women felt that if they become a widow, society will look at them as a bad woman who failed her marriage and not because of her husband.
Social class was an important topic of debate, and that can be seen throughout Wuthering Heights, which was influenced by Emily's work. The characters in the novel were affected by social classes in how they should act, how they should be treated, and who can they
Hello
marry.
there. In this
Emily's work was
section,
very concerned
we
with
are going
one
to
social class
explore
as
and
well as
evaluate
the restricted
her
rights
famous
for
written
women
novel
despite a woman's
called
social class
Wuthering
status.
Heights, which is written by Emily Bronte back in 1847. Furthermore, we are going to evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the novel. Now, Wuthering Heights is a tale of a troubled orphan named Heathcliff and his doomed love for Catherine Earnshaw. It is proven to be, around that time, one of the most popular written masterpieces. First of all, let's begin with characters. The characters that are involved in the novel are Heathcliff, Catherine Earnshaw, Hatton Earnshaw, Edgar Linton, Mr. Lockwood, Nellie Dean, Hindley Earnshaw, and Catherine Linton. These are the main characters from the novel. Heathcliff is a little orphan that is found in the Liverpool street by Mr. Earnshaw, which is Catherine's father. He is tall, dark, and athletic. He also has a black hair and thick brow. When he first enters with Wuthering Heights, Nellie Dean describes him as a dirty and ragged child. End quote. I had a peep at the dirty, black-haired child big enough to walk and talk. Next, we are going to talk about Catherine Earnshaw. Catherine Earnshaw is Heathcliff's stepsister. Emily Bronte described Catherine as a very pretty and that has buniest eye, the sweetest smile, and she also has a long brown hair. Because of her sweet, innocent image, Catherine is portrayed as a naive girl in this novel. She mentioned that she loved Heathcliff so much, but she also mentioned that her love for Edgar Linton, will change, but her love for Heathcliff will remain the same. She chooses to marry Edgar Linton because of her social status. Edgar Linton is on par with her social status and admit that marrying Heathcliff is only just to degrade her status. Basically, she married a man because of social class, not about love. About the strengths of About the strengths of Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights involves many aspects in life, such as family, desire, religions, freedom, social class, revenge, hatred, and jealousy. However, revenge is the most prominent idea in the story. It shows how Heathcliff takes revenge on people who have wronged him. As mentioned before, Heathcliff is an orphan from Liverpool. As soon as he enters the Earnshaw family, he quickly became a favorite for Mr. Earnshaw. This makes Hindley, Mr. Earnshaw's son, jealous of his father's action because he basically favored an orphan over his own biological son. Love. In this novel, the love story between Heathcliff and Catherine Earnshaw seems to be the center of Wuthering Heights. Catherine and Heathcliff's passion among each other is very strong. They have they have the love power beyond the ordinary people. Even though Catherine is married to Edgar Linton, she still has strong feelings towards Heathcliff. She also thinks that marriage cannot separate cannot separate her and Edgar Linton because they are soulmate and they can't possibly live apart. Only death can separate them.
guys, today I'm gonna speak about the weaknesses of the novel Wuthering Heights, written by Emily Bronte. So, basically, this is the weaknesses from the novel Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. In this novel, there are three main weaknesses that we can found. The first weakness is identical names of the characters. The second weakness is too detailed description of situation and emotions. And the third weakness is complicated plot. For the first weakness, the author tends to use similar names for the characters. This confuses readers. For example, Catherine Earnshaw is the mother of Catherine Linton. Both of them have the same name. Sometimes in the writing, the author did not emphasize on which Catherine. A better naming will be great for readers' comprehension. For the second one, too many details on the descriptions in the writing. It may distract readers from the main storyline. Most of the details will bore the readers. This stretched the novel to 247 pages. And also in the novel, there are too many long conversations between characters. And this will definitely bore the readers and make the story become dull. For the third weaknesses, there are two plots in the story which are forward and backward. For the forward, it means the story is going forward in the main storyline until the end. And for the backward, the story will flash back into the past. The plot is confusing because the story always jumps back and forth in time. Not once, but many times. In the first chapter, the story started around 1801, but at some point the story flashed back into 1771 in the time Heathcliff being adopted by Earnshaw couple. It's fine to include flashback, but if there are too many flashbacks, the story will become dull. And in this particular story, there are too many flashbacks. I hope the author give us appropriate amount of flashback and not too many details about them so that we can understand the story in simpler terms. And because of that, I will show you the timeline. The first chapter started around here, at the last dots of this timeline. And suddenly, the author dragged us into the first timeline here, and this pattern always emerged in the story. Not once, but really many times. And that's all about the weaknesses of the novel Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ahmad Shaman bin Abdullah, and I'm here to conclude the video with some trivia that we have found during the Victorian era. During the Victorian era, people were very different, obviously, from our era. For example, during the Victorian era, children were given to wear dresses, regardless of their gender, because doing so was more cost efficient because fabric at that time was very expensive. Another fun trivia about the Victorian era is their dental care plans. In the Victorian era, their toothpaste was a mixture of honey and charcoal. We found that to be very contradicting, as sweet things and tooth does not mix well, but apparently it works during that era. Another trivia about the Victorian era that we found to be very astounding is that apparently drinking beers were more safer than drinking water. Water supplies during the Victorian era were not very good, so a lot of people at that era find that, should I drink beer then? because drinking water make me sick, so I would like to feel good if I'm going to get sick anyway. Another thing, another trivia that piqued our interest is that during the Victorian era, women did use less makeup because makeup was considered as to be a racy and to be a controversial thing, because makeup were used by prostitutes, by sex workers. So women at that era steer away from any form of makeup and prefer to have a natural look. Although they use a bit of powder, but that's the only extent to the makeup. And another fun trivia, the last fun trivia that we have found during the Victorian era was that people in the Victorian era were very, very big on mourning on their death. In the Victorian era, women, the widows, collected their tears in a bottle, and if a man died without having a widow or a single man, their family would hire a woman to cry for him and put her tears in their bottle. Apart from that weird yet, yeah, it's very weird tradition, the widows also will collect hairs and wear it into a ring and put it into a ring or a locket so they can remember their loved one. Okay, thank you very much, and this is the trivia that we have found.